Well, we're still doing more Cutter Simpsons Unhinged. Of course, the big story yet last week is when I announced I would jump from 40 episodes to 50 because of how great some episodes from seasons I have covered has done well. So I'm going to go over them as quickly as possible. And of course, the playlist is in the description down below. Don't worry about that. All right, so I went to season 23 with Lisa Goes Gaga, that 20-minute Lady Gaga commercial. Season 19, that 90s show trying to get rid of that plot hole about Marge and Homer's relationship before Bart. Season 24, when Homer tells about how he hates dogs because Bongo was taken away from him because he bit Mr. Burns and Grandpa was trying to protect Homer, but Homer started hating on Abe's and dogs. Season 3, Homer the Bat, the famous one that beat The Simpsons' first run in syndication when The Simpsons were on Thursday nights instead of Sundays. Season 21's Olympic episode in Vancouver, the warmest winter city, as Homer Simpson puts it, and he got it right. Maud's death from season 11, how it changed many characters. Season 15's Christmas episode, Tis the 15th season. That's the one. And Homer tries to be nice, and Ned can't help but being jealous. The Principal and the Pauper from season 9, the one that kind of jumped the shark. I analyzed it. Season 5, Homer and Apu, when I needed an Apu episode. And, it was kind of good. Who needs the Quickie Mart? Am I right? Season 7's Lisa the Vegetarian, which was the 10th episode. That's the one that Lisa turns into a vegetarian, mostly because of Paul McCartney's influence. Season 22's Love is a Many Strangled Thing, about the Simpsons trying to tell us that Bart deserves to be strangled. Because if he isn't, then he's got violent tendencies. Kind of awkward. Then Todd Wolf, for sake of me, I always get that title wrong. From season 31, in which Todd turns his back on God after not realizing about Maud. So Flanders tries to scare God into him by making him stay with the Simpsons. Lisa gets an F1 from season 35 because, we got to need a kind of a positive Lisa one and Formula One and all that. Season 16's something about marrying, when Homer turns into a minister to marry gay couples and Patty comes out of the closet, which we kind of thought was expected. Season 32's Diary Queen, we talked about, Bart finding Edna's diary and thinking he's an influence on her, but Lisa stupidly decides to tell him that it was her cat. And Bud Flanders cheers him up. And then, of course, I kind of did the Family Guy Simpsons crossover episode 2014, in which it kind of gave the Simpsons a second wind. And people like me were kind of saying, well, come on, 25 years is pretty impressive. But no, we're still going. Bart the Mother from season 10, about Bart and Marge's tenuous relationship, with Bart raising eggs that turned out to be lizards. Season 17's The Italian Bob, in which Sideshow Bob meets the Simpsons in Italy, and, Vendetta. Season 8, Homer's Enemy, the famous one that Frank Grimes gets mad at Homer for coasting his way through life and basically rewarding Homer. Then season 18's Kill Gil, the episode that saw Gil live with the Simpsons, and Marge's inability to say no may have cost her. And I did a psychological evaluation that the real Jim's hasn't done yet. Why? I talked about the Simpsons movie, about the plot line, and maybe how Homer may plant this whole ship all over going to Alaska. The Hail Mary pass from season 16, I thought that it needed to be done as a Super Bowl episode, but it was a good episode with basically Homer's celebrations and Ned trying to make movies out of the Old Testament. And then season 9, I also did another season 9 episode, the episode about uh, Trash of the Titans, in which Homer, runs for sanitation commissioner, makes Springfield uninhabitable, and then they decide to move down the road 5 miles down the road. And I give the fury about the Simpsons moving from place to place because it makes freaking sense. The FIFA episode from season 25, which I croaked it out because I was having problems, but I had a deadline. It was the episode in which, Homer becomes a soccer referee for the World Cup and refuses to take a dive. Who Shot Mr. Burns was my 25th episode. This was the key one because, how many people was accused of shooting Mr. Burns. Season 2's Trios of Horror #1. Well, I did it for season 2 because you never forget your first, and the Trios of Horror anthology. Season 8's Homer's Phobia, to end Gay Pride Month, about Homer trying to balance his love for Bart with his insecurities about the homosexuality, and actually won a few awards. Season 30, Stowe Canada, I put that on Canada Today, mostly because, it's Canada, what do you expect? and about how good it was and how Marge seemed to be stressed over Lisa being in Canada. I was like, what the fuck? And then the 4th of July hit, so season 15's Bart Mango Banner was done, and I talked about how they overreacted. And I thought it was because of the whole 9/11 thing, but no, it was in response to the Dixie Chicks with their statements. Well, it can't be both, can't you? And then I talked about season 4. I talked about March versus the Monorail and also the Spring last exit to Springfield being two of the greatest episodes of all time. Who won it better? And they're both from season 4. So wow. And then I talked about season 37 about the past, present, and future. How the season that has just finished up talked about the past with Bart and Homer's relationship, and Bart and Homer trying to hide Bart's left-handedness. Present about Kurt's thing with crackers and his obsessiveness over Homer and his bipolar stuff, and the future with the hormones of Lisa and Bart causing Marge and Homer great pain. And last week I talked about Barting over the supposed 300th episode, but it was actually number 302. The one that Bart gets emancipated from Homer and hangs up with Tony Hawk and all that. So today we're going to be talking about a season 27 episode that does lead to Bart and Homer's relationship and how maybe that warps has warped Bart's brain, especially with Lisa. We're talking about Barthood this time. Jerk Homer, Marge's worries, Bart's pranks, Lisa's causes, Maggie not talking a lot, Grandpa being senile, Patty and Selma boring Marge, Artie Sif is a jerk, Chief Wiggum making things happen, Mr. Burns being a dick. You can never stop the Simpsons. Heaven knows they've been trying for years and they still come back for more. 37 seasons is a bit much, don't you think? It's a crazy Simpsons. Something happens. A do 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 do. This is not a clip show. Have no fear. I've got topics for years. All right, so Barthood is this episode is season 27's ninth episode, December 13th, 2015. So anyway, Homer and Bart are lying on the grass. And Bart asks questions about nature, but Homer only wants to know why he um, was fell in the grass and all that. So anyway, Marge leaves Bart with Grandpa while Homer heals and all that. So anyway, um, Grandpa allows Bart to drive the car, and Marge actually is not too happy with it, saying that, Bart can't drive and all that. And Grandpa yells at Marge, and then Marge tells Grandpa that Bart's late for his reading lesson with Professor Frink. And so Bart tries to read, but Lisa reads quite well 2 years later. 2 years, well, she's 2 years younger, and Professor Frink praises her instead of Bart. Bart says, why can't I read and all that? I can't be like Lisa. And then Professor Frink says that, if you work in fast food, people can point to the pictures and all that of the food, giving Bart some problems. So, anyway, Lisa paints the famous sailboat that's in the living room and all that, but Bart decides to do one better. He decides to paint the kitchen and all that. It's kind of cool and all that. Unfortunately, Homer goes bonkers over it. Homer has to try to restore the kitchen, and then Bart tries to drive Homer's car but crashes into the kitchen. A psychiatrist says that Bart misbehaves because of Homer's lack of attention and suggests they go camping. However, Homer takes him to a drive-in inn, and Lisa becomes student of the month in her first month at Springfield. So, anyhow, Lisa gets a bumper sticker saying that my child, one student, is an honor roll student in Springfield. Bart tries to make a bumper sticker, but Homer rips it off and all that. So then Bart turns 12, and Marge is upset that Bart doesn't like crusting on his cake. It says, you're fading fast. Everything is gone. and all that. So anyhow, Bart says, "Don't have a cow, man." Says, well, Marge also says, "You lost I caramba," and all that. And Krusty and Bart says, "Well, don't have." And Marge goes, "Yeah, don't have a cow, man. No, don't have an emotional attachment to things." And then Homer begs Bart to just say, "Don't have a cow, man," which impresses Marge. Lisa gets a text saying that she's student of the month for the fourth consecutive year, 48 consecutive months for 4 years. It actually doesn't make sense because, well, obviously it can't be 4 straight years because they're out of school for 2 years and all that. So practically, Lisa's student of the month almost every time, and it does raise a question. It's like, there's Morgan, there's the Super Friends, the geeks that Bart hangs out with in Bart's Comet. It brings to mind Principal Skinner is basically using Lisa to make sure the school doesn't lose funding. But Mine Prince is just as good. That's what Skinner do better. Anyway, Bart decides to run off after feeling overshadowed. So anyway, he and Millhouse actually skateboard and break street lamps. Millhouse gets caught and arrested, but Bart hides with Grandpa, who gives him a BMX bike and teaches him how to be a good BMXer. At 15, he performs stunts on his bicycle. He's looking good. Marge and Lisa decide to leave for a summer camp and leave Bart and Homer all by themselves, trying to fix the Bart and Homer dynamic. Bart decides to throw a party and is actually shocked that Homer actually ends up being stoned at Bart's party of all people, and even Chief Wiggum gets stoned. So Homer tells Bart that he had Bart's abilities all that went until he was born, and says that kids will ruin you, and you got to learn to be an adult. However, Bart takes Homer as a thing and decides to hug. Um, but then Homer says that Bart will not amount to anything, kind of getting Bart his problems. So Bart pours his stuff into the BMX competition and feels like he's out of Lisa's shadow. Unfortunately, Lisa's shadow literally casts it, and Bart loses balance and crashes and hurts himself. And then Lisa gets fed it for her stuff, and Bart can't believe it. And Lisa says, "Don't move. Don't tell me what to do." And then the board smashes him with it. Bike hits him with that. Ow! Told you not to move. So Bart, of course, is upset that Lisa is over him, and of course is revived by Lisa. So then, 3 years later, at the graduation party, which Lisa is graduating with Bart, and we've seen this before, Martin talks to Ralph, who's in a military outfit and basically thinks it's a costume. Well, the military takes advantage of Ralph because of his dumb personality. Bart starts to make caricatures and actually attends Millhouse's graduation party. So Millhouse's parents fight for like what, the 1,000th time or whatever the frick it was. And then Lisa hugs Millhouse and makes him feel good. Millhouse says that she's the best thing of the party, and Bart snaps, saying that "I hate being second best to you" and all that. However, Lisa doesn't believe this and yells at Bart back, saying that "you blame me for everything, for your setbacks." And Lisa says that "I don't get attention from Homer either. Like, everyone thinks of you better than me," which is actually true. He said, Lisa then tells Bart that he's a great artist and can't do anything with his talent. Bart actually takes his sister's rage as a fight. And then years later, he has a bicycle modification shop with that. And then is shocked that Lisa comes to the shop with Nelson, getting him to go to a Swedish film festival and all that. So then Um, Bart actually tells Lisa that he uses his art and has a mural depicting his life, and that's what you see on the screen. If you're watching this with the video, that's the mural and all that. It portrays Bart and Homer on the grass, Bart crashing the car into the kitchen, Bart and Millhouse's pranks, Homer being stoned to Bart's annoyance, Bart being good BMXer, a caricature artist, sad when Grandpa died, getting the BMX from Grandpa, having birthday parties with Marge, and of course, hanging out with Grandpa. So, yeah, that's what he does, and he's proud of it. Lisa's ticked off that she doesn't get to be part of the mural. However, Bart does lower one of the shop's doors, and Lisa has a mural in her homage. Well, obviously, Lisa's the one who got him into this and everything. So Bart does love Lisa after all. And then adult Bart tries to ask questions about Homer stuff, about Bart being drunk and Homer being stoned and all that. Homer then tells Bart that when there's awkward situations, always pretend that you have a phone call. Kind of weird. All that. So, anyway, there was a film called Boyhood in 2014, which this was a parody of. It was basically a coming of age drama film and all of that. Filmed from 2002 to 2014. This was actually rated, well, highest rated show of the night for Fox, and 5.9 million people watched it. It was actually a C. The AV Club says, while this boyhood inspired episode of Simpsons has the storytelling gimmick of Richard Linklater's film, it misses the point completely. Instead of using the time lapse structure to lend new insight into Bart's mind, the script just rehashes the same old character beats and jokes with different haircuts. It is a missed opportunity. The Great Den of Geek gave it 4 out of 5, saying that it was actually well made, intelligent, poignant, funny, and muted. Generally, they use film parodies to spring forward to lunacy, but they're too reverential. They're faithful to the style and the feel of the original and uses it for the characterizations. But as in most Simpsons future episodes, they contradict and one day be contradicted. Although the guy from Den of Geek said it was the best 2010 Simpsons episode. Phooey. I doubt that highly. But anyway, yeah, so that was Barthood in a nutshell about the episode. So now I'm going to be talking about the Bart and Lisa dynamic, and maybe, just maybe, Bart and Homer's problems have something to do with it. So as you see, it's one of the screen grabs of Bart and Lisa yelling at each other and all that, and Bart blaming Lisa for his mishaps. But to me, I mean, Bart has a decency to blame Lisa for his stuff because he's upset. But I mean, Lisa is always in the family shadow. There are many times in the TV show and comic books that Lisa is basically second banana and they ignore her. I remember a comic book story that depicts Homer stealing something from Moe's Tavern, like future, some kind of future thing. Marge gets a card that worries her. Maggie is told as orally efficient. Bart is called an underachiever and proud of it. And Lisa gets middle child syndrome. Basically that, you're too old to be cute like Maggie and too young to be recognized like Bart. So anyway, Lisa feels better, but Homer decides to get Nelson to come live with them and all that. Unfortunately, though, Homer starts to have troubles of being emancipated, if you will, by Nelson. Emancipated. Did I say that right? But anyway, yeah. And then he has his own problems, and he does pass Nelson off on Willie, which is great, and then he can be head of the household. Unfortunately, Lisa then tells him that this whole thing was about him not paying attention to her, and basically he never did. But then Homer gives Lisa money for Malibu Stacy dolls, and Bart says at the last panel saying, "If you can't pay attention to your kids, just pay them." Okay, maybe. But yeah, Lisa feels like the second banana. I mean, Lisa's smart and can hold her own in arguments, but unfortunately, the writers basically make Lisa into a nut, if you will, a liberal nut. That's what they kind of call her. I mean, Lisa's a decent character. I'll give them that, but her outspokenness just basically pisses people off. It rubs people the wrong way, even though that she is well-meaning and all that. This, of course, reminds me of Degrassi's Emma for her outspokenness and how it drives people the wrong way. I mean, Emma barely in the 9 seasons was hated. Was without hate. I mean, season one Emma, she was hated for how she was dealing with Manny being in cheerleading and Liberty being touched by Armstrong. Season 2, she had a mountain of a molehill with Snake being with Spike. I mean, why would you want your teacher dating your parent? And then season 3, she has the problems with Manny being hypocritical and wanting to sexualize herself. Season 4, she kind of drove away her friends with her problems with Chris and all that, and it led to her to nearly die by Rick's gun. It's true. Season 5, the whole thing with Peter. Why was she with Peter? Season 6, um, the thing with JT's death and her acting out and basically people telling her to shut up, if you will, and then she internalizes things. Season 7, her want for a boyfriend once Sean leaves for the army, and then ends with Damien. And then seasons 8 and 9 practically trying to fit in, and it doesn't work. But of course, if you watch my Cutter Degrassi stuff, that's where you get. So, is Bart and Lisa's problems due to Bart and Homer? Does Bart and Homer's relationship kind of lead to Bart's anger towards Lisa? In a sense, yes. In a sense, no. I mean, Bart and Homer's relationship is not that great. Well, it fits perfectly because Homer and Grandpa's relationship sucked. The sec, the second, the third episode I did of Simpsons Unhinged, I talked about Homer's relationship with Abe because of Bongo having to be sent away and how Homer kind of had resentment for Abe. And after all, Abe didn't help the situation once Mona left. Homer felt a bit more jaded. Homer's a decent person, but yeah. And maybe Homer projects his own problems on Grandpa with the thing with Bart. And maybe Bart is going to project his problems on his kids, Picard and Kirk. But to me, I think that this was a decent episode of The Simpsons. And, it talks about how Lisa thinks Bart's number one and says, and gives Bart some advice, even though she was raging about it, but maybe it lights a fire under Bart, which it does. So of course Bart realizes that he needs to take the advice from Lisa, and he does quite well. But of course, it's basically Bart's problems with Homer he projects onto Lisa. It does make sense, and Bart does have a right to get angry about that because it will happen. But it's not right for him to blame Lisa for everything. I mean, Lisa gets massively ignored by everybody. Her only highlight is basically student of the month for 4 years, and basically Principal Skinner kind of sucking up to her. I mean, you can give it to Martin, you can give it to even Lewis, or was that right? Yeah, Lewis. Richard's the gray-haired one. But anyway, I feel in a sense that Bart's relationship with Lisa is basically him being jealous of her when in fact Lisa's jealous of Bart. And Lisa has a right to be jealous of Bart because everyone pays attention to Bart and she feels left out. And her outspokenness doesn't help matters. But to me, I think that this was a decent thing. But we kind of all knew that Bart and Homer has a bad relationship, and maybe Bart is bad to his kids. Who knows? But Bart tries to break the cycle of abuse. Well, quote unquote abuse. All right, so that's this episode. Next Saturday, we're going to season 13, Unlucky 13, if you will. And we're going to be talking about an episode that changed Lisa forever. We already did the Lisa turns vegetarian angle, but what about Lisa turning Buddhist, huh? You may want to know this one. I know it's a partial Christmas episode, whatever. But anyway, we're going to be talking about She of Little Faith from season 13 next week. Anyhow, I'm Jeff Diamond, a dude.